And Betsy and I are part of a larger community resources for science team. A number of you may be aware of our organization. We're Bay Area centric, although during COVID, we've been doing a lot of Zoom sessions, as you can imagine. So we've actually been getting a lot of interest and folks jumping in from all over the country, honestly. But CRS is here for you, as Betsy mentioned. We've got a number of planning tools, on-call support. The website is quite extensive, and there's a lot of great hands-on lessons that are available there. Just a couple things to highlight that we're working on. In the spring, we're running an environmental literacy series. We did a fall series of 10 workshops, partnering with other organizations to deliver those. We'll be doing another set of those this spring, looking at environmental literacy, climate change, specifically climate science literacy. These are all free. They're typically on Thursday afternoons after school or Saturday mornings, and they go from 60 to 90 minutes in length. So just check out the website. There's a lot of information there, and it's we're always curating the website. And so if you've got feedback or ideas, we're definitely open to that as well.
Somebody just asked if we could drop those links in the chat. We are going to send you documents with all of the links for everything that you get today. So we will send that to you. So you will definitely get those. So one of our programs that you may or may not be familiar with is Bay Area Scientists in Schools, and we do have teams that are doing distance lessons. I don't know, has anybody done had any basis in their classroom during this COVID time? Yeah, so we're here and still doing basis, and that's a really great way to get another kind of infusion of science into your classroom from young scientists from UC Berkeley. So don't forget about that, and holler to CRS if that's something that you want.
So our team, our executive director is Teresa Barnett. She's been with the organization for 10 plus years. Is just a great leader for our team, very dedicated to science support, really interested in bringing real scientists together with educators. And one of those pathways is through grad students like Betsy's mentioning, and bringing grad students research and educators, especially those that are maybe new educators coming in, and pairing them so that the scientists can benefit from science, from educational perspectives, and the educators can get the latest science. So there's a lot of that work we're doing. Teresa and Denise are delivering the analogous workshop that we're doing with you right now with the K2s from your district. And then myself and Betsy are here to deliver yours today. My background's in environmental science and education. I've been doing informal education and professional development for the past 25 plus years. Worked at the Chabot Space and Science Center for years before COVID hit, and a lot of science museums had to let folks go, and so I was one of those, but jumped in with CRS, who we've partnered with for years. So it's been a great opportunity to take some of that work that I did at Chabot and really map it over to what we're doing at CRS. And then I'll let Betsy introduce herself as well.
Okay, well, my name is Betsy Mitchell. I'm a biologist by training, and I work for the Berkeley Natural History Museums, and my connection at the University of California, Berkeley really helps me connect scientists to teacher professional development and classroom work. And I just really love doing that because I love working with teachers. And no matter what it is, if there's curiosity involved and exploration, I'm in. So, yeah.
So our agenda today, this is kind of a quick outline. We're going to be focusing on life science, as you know. We're going to do an activity that Betsy and I came up with called Plants Through the Window. And actually Denise on the other team was instrumental in building the foundation for both of these PDs. And then Betsy and I have been building off of her framework. We're going to do a little bit of sketching. We'll have you do a couple of sessions in breakout rooms where you'll get to discuss some of the ideas that are presented and some of the activities. Look at the idea of labeling sketches. Spend a little bit of time on sort of a profound piece of life science, which is, how do we even know something is alive? Is it living or non-living? So Betsy's going to take us through that and think about some of those connections also between living and non-living things. And Betsy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to our
I was working on breakout rooms, but
No, you're fine.
no,
Yeah.
I think what we're hoping is that the things that we give you are things that you can build on in any direction that you want. They can be a starting point to go through. If we're talking about plants, you can go form and function, you can go community connections, however works for you, but they're activities that you can do with your kids at home. And then hopefully we can build on that next week with extensions.
And as just to reemphasize that you will be getting some supply kits. I know you're aware of that, and be able to engage hopefully your students with those supplies in preparation for our next session towards the end of the month. So today, really simple things that we've asked if you could gather at home, just the standard stuff, a blank piece of paper or a notebook, pencil or pen to write with, and then some colored markers, crayons. Pencils would be great too, just because we're going to be doing a little bit of sketching, and those colors can really help enhance the sketches that you create. All right, so let's kick it off. This is what we're calling Spring is Here, time for the sciences of life. We know spring is a sort of a magical time in our calendar, and we're definitely experiencing here in the Bay Area. Not sure if it was raining up your way in Richmond area, but we had a nice little downpour here for about 45 minutes just before the session started. Little light on the rain this year. You know, as a climate scientist myself, it's concerning me that we're seeing some overall trends and changes in the weather. But you know, spring is here, and it's been some great weather to enjoy, and we are getting some rain. So I was saying to Betsy before you all got on that it's helping to meet that deficit, you know, and the CRS snowpack is looking okay, not where we would hope it would be, but not too dire either. So at any rate, we've got a nice image here on the screen of some living things. However, something's missing. Does anybody want to jump in? And so we've got spring is here. We know lots of things happen in the spring. Some images of life, and anything that we might be missing here in our pictorial description of life. And you can drop it in the chat as well if you like, or just unmute yourself. And what might be missing from our image here when we think about life?
What's missing from that image? If you were making an image of life, what else would you add to that slide? Eggs. Ooh, nice. Humans, sun. Wow. Greenery, rain, plants, flowers. Excellent. I see a couple of things, the green and flowers and blooming and plants and plants. And definitely there's not humans there, and we are definitely a big part of that picture. Great responses.
All right, yeah, and I love a lot of the things you mentioned. The idea of the sun being a sort of a central factor, really important. We'll touch on that this session a little, and maybe in the next session. And then the sort of the big one that pretty much everything that's on the screen is depending on here would be the plants. So plants, you know, as we know, are everywhere, and they're the foundation for so much of our food chain and living things. So, and plants are doing some pretty neat things right now during the spring, and so we want to hone in on those today. Really focus on this idea of plants, and how can we connect with plants in sort of this distance learning environment. So how can we create an experience that gets kids thinking about the outdoors and getting outdoors and noticing and wondering things about the outdoors. So that's what we're going to do with our first activity, is really hone on this idea of plants and that they're everywhere and they're accessible to us. So we're going to call this this first activity Plants Through Your Window. And it's a real simple starting point. And one of the things I've been appreciating with the CRS team as we've been developing these things is we've started to really think about, in this distance learning environment, transforming how we consider our own home spaces. You might, as a scientist, scientists don't just stop their science when they leave the lab, right? And we don't stop being educators when we leave our classrooms. Science is everywhere, and our laboratories are everywhere. And so we've really kind of latched onto this idea that your home, it can be your laboratory. It's obviously your educational space. It's your learning classroom now with what your students are doing. We know that comes with challenges, but it's also kind of a magical time to really expand beyond the borders of what we might think of as our school or as our science place. And so if you consider your home as your laboratory and your science exploration space, what we'd like you to do right now is take a moment to look outside. If you've got a window accessible to you, just spin around and have a look outside. And if you don't have a window, a door would serve just fine as well. We just want you to have a look outside. And these are kind of our prompting questions. We're going to give you a couple minutes to do this. Take a close look, specifically as you look outside, for any plants that you see. And what kinds of plants do you see? Even if it's not by name, if you're not recognizing them by name, you might recognize them by how they appear. What colors are those plants? What shapes are they? What sizes? What type of plant is it? And then as you kind of explore your outdoor laboratory, pick one specifically. Maybe one catches your eye, one looks interesting, you're wondering something about one of those plants. Make a selection. And this is important because this is going to be your plant for the next few weeks. And so it's important you pick something interesting for yourself. Consider the criteria that you use to select it. What drew you to that particular plant? What makes it interesting to you? So we're going to take.
Should we do that now, or should we go through the rest of it and let them go one time to look at their plant?
What do you think? You want to take? Sure.
It would save time.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good because we are getting a little bit. We're just only slightly behind. I think that's a great idea for efficiency. So hold that thought and get yourself poised to get out to that window or door and have a look. So just kind of setting ourselves up for this exploration, plants through your window. In your notebook or on that piece of paper you have, you're going to draw this one special plant that you've identified outside. And again, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to observe this plant over time. So the idea is next time we gather, you're going to have some data, right? Because you're going to have between now and 3 weeks from now, when we gather again, to have had a chance to observe this plant. So that might be a criteria for your selection, because maybe you think that plant's going to change in some way. And then the overarching question, given that we're coming into spring, is what kind of things happen to plants in the springtime? So you can think a little bit about that as you're making that choice. And maybe you're seeing something out there that's reminding you of spring for some reason when you go out and look. So what we'd like to do is run you through a quick practice of the kind of ways you might explore the outdoor plant that you're looking at. So we're going to practice with this image, this picture of a flower that you're seeing on the screen here. It's actually a sketch, pretty nice sketch that we found. And so first prompting question is, what might you say about this flower? So the kind of the classic, I notice. What do you notice about this flower?
And so what we want you to do is turn off your mic and say out loud using the prompt, I notice blank, I notice, and say it out loud. Or you can say it out loud in the chat, but however you want to do it, but we want you just to let the thoughts flow really freely and just come out of your mouth or come out onto the screen. So we're just going to take a couple minutes and everybody can unmic and just whatever you notice, just say it out loud. Okay? Ready, set, go. Unmute.
Notice this flower has buds.
Keep going, everybody, all at once.
There's five leaves.
I noticed that the petals are purple and white. The petals of the flower are purple and white.
I noticed there are some very long, thin leaves at the bottom, and there are some shorter, wider leaves towards the top.
Yeah. I noticed that the leaves are green.
Great, and just picking some things out from the chat. Miss Kelso, petals have 2 colors, white and rose colored. Nice. I know
somebody else noticed the leaves are green.
The leaves are narrow. The stem is cut at a 45-degree angle. All right. Great. So kind of putting some numbers to our observation. I love it.
That's great. So when you say stuff like this out loud, it's a great way to kind of get the juices flowing so that when you go and you look, now you have some ideas about things when you go to your plant that you might notice and put into your drawing. So it's just kind of a way to warm up and think about helping you to notice things that you could put into your drawing.
Okay, and then, you know, observations can come to us in terms of our thinking, which we might typically think as words coming to us as words, but we had that great comment from Mr. Bean about it being a stem cut at a 45-degree angle. So nature, there's mathematics involved in nature, and there's ways we can numerically quantify, or the number of petals that you noticed, and the leaves, the 5 leaves that one of you observed. So definitely some numbers can be part of that that noticing, and maybe even a wondering why would it have 5 leaves? Why would it be kind of at a specific angle? And then what does it remind you of? Because sometimes science is about association. It's about comparing something, you know, that you thought about before, or accessing prior knowledge to make meaning of what you're seeing now. So what does this flower remind you of?
Can I unmute and holler?
It reminds me of a flower that my grandmother had in her yard at her house.
Yeah.
That's great. I appreciate you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it kind of reminds me of an ice cream cone. I don't know why. Ever since I've seen this picture, that's what I've thought.
I just was going to share that the grandparent comment. My 99-year-old grandfather recently passed, and I've been going through his things, and this particular piece of art, the way this is artistically displayed, reminds me of his time. Some of the things that I found going through his artifacts and his memorabilia, this image, it just brought me to things I've seen in his stuff.
And Jeffrey says it reminds me of James Audubon bird drawings. So that same kind of a thing. Really nice, lovely, and really a lot of detail, right? Those people put a lot of detail into their drawings intentionally. Yeah. Okay, let's go.
All right. So now it's your turn. So now we are going to set you free here and get you up off your chairs, out of your sofa, and take a look at the plants outside your window. And we're going to think about these prompts. I'll leave these prompts up on the screen, actually. But go ahead, take 2 minutes, and yeah, come on back. But find a nice outdoor space where you can make it some observations. Hone in on that one plant that catches your eye or seems interesting. Keeping in mind that this will be your observational specimen for the next 3 weeks. So pick something interesting.
So take your notebook or a piece of paper, and you're going to draw your plant. You'll have 5 minutes to do that. And so make sure that you're back here within 5 minutes, because we really need to move on after that. But go find a plant and draw it and see what that experience is like. And we'll see you in a few.
Yeah, and here's some things to think about as you're drawing your plant. So try and make it as realistic as you can. Don't worry about being a good or bad artist, but just do your best to sort of replicate what that looks like with your drawing. Fill your page. You know, this sketch doesn't have to be in a small corner in the bottom of your notebook. Just fill the page, dedicate 1 page to the sketch. Use colors to enhance it, any labels that you want to start in with. And again, if there's numbers that you might associate with your sketch, feel free to put those in as well. So yeah, we'll reconvene in 5 minutes at about 4 o'clock. So come on back in about 4 more minutes.
Four minutes. Makes us at 4 o'clock. Yeah, there's a nice palm tree right there on the screen if you don't have a window. Good comments.
Empty chairs out there means active observers. That's great.
Yep.
We'll give our team another maybe 2 minutes or so to.
Well, they'll get back when they get back. Still working.
Still see a few empty chairs out there, so we'll give it another minute.
Oh.
All right, it's about 4 o'clock. So folks wanna, if you can hear my voice and your chair is not filled there, but you're nearby, come on back. And let's check in for a minute on your observations. And again, this is along the lines of really trying to do our best to make science accessible to the students at home. I know you've all become pretty strong experts in this. And what can we do? And this idea of observation, putting on our science hats is really a way to do that, to really get our students in that frame of thinking, if you will. All right, I see that Ms. Weaver chose a fig tree because she thinks it's going to change in the next few weeks. So that was kind of the hook that drew her in to look at that fig tree. Great. All right, and Ms. Kelso as well picked a fig tree. Excellent. All right, so as you were drawing, hopefully we're thinking about some things like, we talked about what will happen to it over the next few weeks, and will it change, and why do you think it might change? What is leading you to that line of thinking? For example, is it some prior knowledge? How did you know it was a fig tree for the two of you that picked that, and for Ms. Heckman, the apple tree? How do you already know that those are those trees? So that's some good.
Because it's in the back of my house.
Yeah. But it's one thing to kind of have a feeling for what happens, it's going to change, but now to look in a little bit more closer detail about what is really changing and how fast does that change happen. There's a lot of ways you can look at that change. So by just zooming in on it, it can add some new dimensions to what you already know about your tree. Nice. Okay.
All right, so we're back. All right, so we're gonna have you, we're gonna break you now into some breakout rooms now and just consider what you just did. So, but now putting on your teacher hat. And by the way, you know, Betsy and I, we kind of toggle back and forth between having our teacher hats on or teaching you as students, but also modeling how we might teach students ourselves, both having done quite a bit of that work as well. And so just encourage you to be learners today, but also putting your teacher hats on. How might your students engage in this activity? What prompts would you use, both in their notebooks potentially, you know, the kind of, and what discussion prompts? You know, the easy ones are kind of what we model, the I notice, I wonder, which I'm sure many of you have used. And then, you know, keeping our minds on this distance learning environment, what portions of this might work in an asynchronous environment versus a synchronous teaching, you know, the live in-person teaching that you're doing. So we've created a Jamboard for you, and probably a lot of you have used this tool. It's part of the Google Suite. And essentially, I'll just click into mine so you can see it on the screen. And then we're going to drop, Betsy's already dropped the link in the chat to a Jamboard, so you can click on that in the chat. A Jamboard is essentially just a place, think of it like when you're doing a PD and you have one of these charts and everyone wants to popcorn out their ideas in a written format. So think of it like a virtual Post-it note board. And so here's the Jamboard that we set up for you. And we're looking for two kind of bits of feedback or ways that you might integrate this into your teaching. So what kind of prompts would you use to engage your students? Both prompts that you might have them use in our notebook, but also maybe in a synchronous environment, in a discussion format. Sort of a quicker, shorter prompt potentially might be appropriate here. So we'd like you to put your ideas onto the left side, and you can just use these sticky notes. It's super simple. If you haven't used this, you just click sticky note, type something on it, and you can then drop your sticky note onto the Jamboard. You can, if you're a little bit vain like me, you'll make it huge. If you're a little more discreet, then maybe you'll make it small. But have some fun with it. Leave your ideas for notebook and discussion prompts. And then teaching. How might this lesson, this idea of looking at plants outside of their window or door over time, work in a synchronous environment versus an asynchronous environment? And then Betsy's dropping you into breakout rooms now, and we'll be back in about 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, so in your breakout room, you'll be in a grade with other teachers of the same grade level, and you can just talk about your experience and what you would do. And then you can have one of these pages and you put your ideas there, and then we'll be able to look at what everybody else says. So
And find a page. So for example, like up here at the top where I'm navigating, there's 8 pages. So you don't all have to jump in on one Jamboard. They're all the same, but just find one that's open, and then you can all jump in and start working. There's 8 of them. All right, have fun. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Oh, I'm supposed to stop the recording now too, right, Betsy?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so what we thought we'd do, what Betsy's going to do is we noticed maybe about half the Jamboards got used, which is fine. We're going to consolidate some of those things and maybe do a quick share out towards the end of the workshop. But
or we can send you a document with all of the ideas so you can have everybody's ideas.
Yeah. And actually, just a reminder that because the session is being recorded, it'll also be available at the end. So this slide deck, the Jamboard, and all the resources that we are sharing we'll follow up with you on that. But maybe just a couple of shares on the idea of prompts, notebook and discussion prompts that you find valuable, maybe with this lesson in mind. And then this idea of using this lesson in an asynchronous or synchronous environment. So anybody want to share?
Any prompts that you thought would be particularly useful?
Something we talked about is not necessarily about prompts, but asynchronous and synchronous, maybe leaving drawing for asynchronous because
Yeah.
yeah, and then they can just sketch their little hearts out and use
Right,
as
they
much
can have
time.
more than 3 minutes to draw
Yeah.
their plant. Right, exactly.
That's a great idea. That totally speaks to the idea of make it big, make it detailed, add color, spend time with it. You know, your sketch could come in a couple of sessions too, right? It doesn't have to all be in that first 5 minutes. You might come back and add your color later.
One thing our group discussed was if students live in an apartment complex where there might not be a lot of plants, potentially doing it in like a small group setting, and they observe it as a team where one student who like does have a lot of plants outside can take their laptop with them and the whole team observes together.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah, that was something that I was wondering about. If kids everywhere in your district can look outside and see a plant, like, is that actually true? I mean, you can walk down sidewalks and there's always plants in the cracks, right? But so, and I think that's another thing is like, there's plants everywhere really when you start to look. It can be surprising.
Which was my prompt was, what is something that surprises you?
Nice. Yeah.
Mhm.
I was thinking before the prompt, even I might sort of show some examples and maybe model how other scientists have drawn or labeled plants, just to give them a idea
Yeah.
how that looks like. Not that they have to copy it, but you know, just give them a little more prior knowledge.
Mhm.
Right. You could give them an example of an animal done by a scientist and
And we're
so-
gonna, yeah, and I think there's something about the idea of scaffolding the information too. So, and building over time. And we're gonna show you some examples to that point of some sketches and notebooks that we really have enjoyed and appreciate.
Yeah, that was a good segue. Shall we do it? Do that?
Yeah. Whoops, sorry. I think, what did I do here? Oh, that's the jam. There's some of the Jamboard, but sorry, let me get back to where I want to be. Not that one, that one. Okay, apologize, I got out of sync here. Go way back. Right. All right, so as we mentioned early on in workshop when we were doing introductions, the CRS website has a real smorgasbord of things and it's a real great resource for you. So we really want to encourage you to dive in and just look and see what's there and also what's not there. We're like I say, it's constantly being curated and updated. But within that, there are some great resources around sketching and notebooking. And so I'm just going to click into here and just show you this. This is a screenshot of the page you'd be looking at for science notebooking and sketching. And when you click into it, it'll take you to a list of things that are related to not just sketching, but you can see sentence frames, lines, textures. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me. The Beatles one was one that Betsy and I were very much appreciating and attracted to. So just really spend some time, you know, because there's a lot here that I think you can benefit from. Just to kind of take you in a little bit to one of them, it kind of gives you some information and then there's handouts, in some cases full lesson plans. So spend some time, you know, here when you do have time. And I think you'll find some resources that might be useful and relevant for your students. So kind of jumping back in, sorry. I wouldn't call myself a Zoom expert yet. I'm a Zoom, I'm a level 3 out of, I don't know what. But we'll bring us back. So there's some really nice, as you can imagine, and again, I think sometimes to the point of if you give too much too fast, it could be intimidating, I suppose. You know, looking at some of these though, I think they're accessible and they speak to, you know, these are some of our younger students' drawings here in a notebook. So showing the examples that aren't the most you know, the best, if you will, but something that's really sort of models what you really might see students do, and just encouraging students to not think about theirs drawing up against someone else's or something they saw that they really enjoyed, but this is their own and this is their depiction of something that they're observing. So, and the color here you can see really helps to bring out some of the detail. The left-hand one, you know, has got some labeling on it. The right-hand ones are using both color and some labeling and some dates you can see in those. So lots of things out there around sketching. Here's a number of other ones that we found. Betsy and I were both really appreciating the detail on the right-hand fern. And I really like the coloration of that second on the right side, the second from the one there, which they've actually taken the specimen, the redwood needles, and taped them in and then done a sketch right alongside it. So that's kind of a neat technique. And then some of the labeling. And I don't know, Betsy, anything you wanted to call out about some of these examples?
I just think it's nice to see what kids can do. I think it's really important that there are words, images, and I think adding numbers is really good. Arrows, zoom in, zoom out. So there's a lot of ways you can add a lot of information into a drawing. It's really not about it being a piece of art. It's really about it conveying information, and that's our goal. And so all of those are techniques to help do that. So the more kids practice that, the more they're going to be able to do it.
And here's a neat little technique. They created their own little magnifying glass and zoomed in on the spores of that fern plant. So just through, but visually, you know, created a kind of a visual technique for zooming in and getting a closer look. So another way to think about you're creating, you know, a detailed drawing is this ABCDE method, if you will, being really accurate with your drawing. So taking the time to make it as realistic as possible. Again, filling the page, don't be shy. Just use that whole page and reserve it just for the sketch itself. Adding color when you can, being detailed, going over it again, coming back and looking at it round two. Maybe you missed something in that first pass. And then using arrows, diagrams, labeling, numbers, anything that you can add to enhance the sort of the complexity and detail of your drawing can also add sort of some robustness to it.
Does anybody use ABCDE in their science notebooks? Have you used that before? Yeah. It's pretty nice and straightforward. Gets you right to the point.
And of course, gallery walks are a great technique too. Once students have started to engage, having them step up, step back away from their drawings and sharing them with each other is another way to kind of get juices flowing and creativity. All right, and then these are a couple. I already went into that Beatles project link, but these are some examples from the Lawrence Hall Science. Betsy, did you want to say anything more about?
I just wanted to point out that when we did I Notice and we said it out loud, it reminds me of, and I wonder, those are all part of a lesson called I Notice, I Wonder, it reminds me of, and it's really beautifully presented by the Lawrence Hall of Science Beatles website. And there's a really nice write-up there. And they talk about saying it out loud and all that is in that particular lesson plan. So it's just a nice reference if you want to know more about using that. That's all.
Okay, so now we're gonna actually step back and take another look. Take a little bit. We have our plant. We've done a little bit of observation. We've shared out how this may or may not work in the student environment, distance learning environment, or within some of the living habitats where our students are. So some ideas about group learning and one student sharing his or her window, if you will. Now we want you to kind of think about that place that you observed and that object you observed and find another couple objects. And this time it doesn't have to be a plant necessarily. And we want you to think about this third question on the screen. Are these other objects you're looking at, are they living or are they non-living? So spend another minute or two. You're not going to need to do any more sketching now, but go ahead, Betsy.
Well, we're not going to go yet
Oh,
to the
sorry.
window.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
First, we want to talk a little bit about how you can tell if something is living or non-living,
Thank you.
right? So if you go to the next slide.
That one?
Yeah. So how can you tell if something is alive versus not alive in your environment? What do living things have in common with each other? What features do they share that help us know that they're alive? So you can jot some ideas in your notebook or maybe share some ideas in the chat, and let's just kind of start to think about what does that mean to be alive? What are some criteria? How might we define a living object as distinct from a non-living object? Okay, we've got they can reproduce and grow. Okay, so things that grow. Okay, that's great. Any other ideas? Okay, they eat and they poop. Yep. They produce energy.
Yeah, breathing.
Breathe, decompose. They can die. Actually, if you look it up in the dictionary, life is the absence of death and death is the absence of life. But I always thought that was just really unfair. And that's cheap. But anyway, okay, so think about that. So when you go out to look out your window, you have some ideas about what features you might be able to use to tell what is a living and a non-living thing. So next slide. So in your notebook or on your piece of paper, we're going to make 3 columns. And I want you to, one says living, one says non-living, and one is either something you're not sure about or that once was living but is not living anymore. Okay. And write down those things. But as you're doing that, think about why did you choose each item and why did you put it in that category? Okay. So I want to know what's behind your thinking of putting it in there. So this kind of gets you back to the part of science. And this, I'm talking to you as a teacher now. We want students to use evidence and make arguments. And so we want to engage their reasoning. And so here's a way that you can have them looking at their environment and think about how their observations support their claims. So that's why we're asking you to do that. So anyway, so fill this out, find something that's living, something that's non-living, and something that you're not sure about or that was once living but is not now living. Okay, so we're gonna give you a couple minutes to go and see what you can find out your window that fits into these categories. Okay, ready, set, go. 4 minutes, shall we say? Is that enough?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Excellent.
There was one, Betsy too, Miss Jensen said, living things need food and water. So a dependency on other things in the environment. That's nice. And maybe the colors can be something that's different between living and not living non-living things.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many. Colors are often different between something living or not.
I like that one.
Yeah, need food and water. So I got reproduce and grow, eat, need food and water. I gotta watch the time though. Okay. Breathe, they can die.
And Betsy, maybe, do you want to do the breakout rooms for this, or do you want to just do it as a group? About 4:30 now.
Yeah, maybe we should just go.
Just keep them together, huh?
Yeah. I wonder, we could make a new slide with a list of everything.
Or we can make a Jamboard.
Well, we could just add a slide, right?
There's a way to do this. There's a whiteboard feature you can engage with.
Oh.
I haven't used that.
Oh, yeah, I could try
I
that.
saw it used in a workshop, but I haven't done it myself.
Well, we could make a whiteboard and just, I've got this list that they made: reproduce, grow, eat, need food and water, produce energy, breathe, can die, different colors.
Yeah, you could do it towards the end, like, yeah. So we'll come back in another minute, about one more minute, and share out some of the things that we discovered out there and put on our living, non-living, and not sure chart. Oh, John was able to write in on the chart.
Oh, that's pretty good. How did you do that? You have to go to the slide deck, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Looks like folks are coming back.
Yeah, it's called Annotating, and it's up in the view options. If you want to try it, we can.
Oh.
The top window of your Zoom window where it says view options. And then it says annotate.
Nice. Huh.
And then you can
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
and
Well, let's go ahead.
yeah, you can enter text, or you can, just put stars, or
Cool.
if you use the text box, you can type. So.
All right.
Oh, nice.
Can we go to the next slide?
Sure. Thanks, John.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great. So is everybody pretty much back? I don't see Jeffrey or Jennifer. Some people are still out, I think. Hard to tell because cameras are off. Wait another minute or so.
Sure.
Okay.
My internet bandwidth is kind of low, so that's why I have my camera off.
Right. Yeah, I know a lot of, and yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'm going to ask you to do next is I'm going to ask somebody to volunteer to share one of the things that they found and discuss that why did they think it was living or non-living? What was the evidence? What did you directly observe about it that told you that? Or what do you know about it? And what does it have in common with other living things? Or if it's non-living, why do you think it was non-living? And what was your evidence? And does it have anything in common with living things? So if somebody, some brave soul, would be ready to volunteer.
Yeah.
Awesome.
My pine tree is living. It is continually getting taller, growing. My anchor just sits where it sits. It's not changing in any way.
Okay. So the anchor is non-living and it's not changing.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a non-living feature, and growing is a living feature. Okay, so those are some interesting criteria. Anybody else?
So I have an I'm not sure one because I have a worm bin. And the worm bin itself is plastic, but inside there is dead matter, but there's also all kinds of living organisms. So the container is holding all dead, all the old garbage, but it's also holding my live organisms, a lot more than just worms.
Right, so it has living organisms in it.
Non-living things that used to be alive, and it's contained in something that is not alive.
So a worm bin actually does everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say the worm bin itself is alive?
The plastic containing the worm bin? No, but what's inside of it is very much alive.
Right. And so you kind of also have a community, and the community could be considered a living thing, depending on how you think about it.
There's a community in there.
And what about the dead matter? So that was once alive, but is no longer alive. So it's not living thing now, but it once was a living.
Like the shredded newspapers, which come from trees.
That's another good example.
Lettuce and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, well, what, anybody else have something that they want to share?
Along the same ideas, I was thinking of parts of the garden over here. Part of it is sand. That definitely wasn't living, I'm guessing. But there's also some soil here, which has like some organic matter in it, which at one point was alive, or if it's not alive right now.
Right.
It also has some some wood chips there, and of course, wood I would think would have had to come from a tree, which was alive at one point. So, but those are the things I was wondering about.
Yeah. So all these are really, really, really great observations. And so there's kind of two things we can do with this. One is we can go from here and we can try to make a list of what we think are features that distinguish living things. And let's go to the next slide. So let's make a list of criteria that makes something living versus non-living. And do you want to do Eric, a Jamboard, and we can, a whiteboard, we can just type up a list and then we can test something. Or do it right on here.
We could do it on here with the annotate okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we had some ideas that people came up with. It was growing, something that you saw and used. So if you want to just shout out things, reproduce. Eat. And if you're eating, you're using energy. So living things use energy.
It
Die.
changes with the seasons, maybe.
Oh, change. Oh, yeah, change with seasons. Changes colors or different colors. Living and dead things can be different colors, came up before.
And maybe almost the same, but maybe it's some sort of a life cycle. So that the changes go in some, preordained order.
In a directional change. Maybe not purposeful, well, sort of purposeful. Growing to reproduce. Do we have reproduce on there?
Yep.
Yes.
Interact with other living things.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Moves, because even plants move, towards the sun.
Great. Movement.
These are great.
Right. So once you get a list like this, we can take an object and we can test this and see, do these criteria really work? So what if we take, okay, so let's take the apple tree, for example. So we can go through this. Was the apple tree growing? So that one, that fits. Do apple trees reproduce?
Well, they have the, I mean.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
make apples. Do they use energy? Do they eat?
they
They don't really eat,
they
but
don't really eat, but they get the nutrients. They suck up the nutrients from the soil.
mhm. And they use energy. Where do they get their energy?
They get it from the sun.
Right. Do they die? Yes. They change with seasons.
Yes.
Do they change color when they die?
Yeah. They can.
Do they have a directional life cycle?
I mean, pretty much. I mean, it's like, yeah, they have makes the buds and then the apples and then it, yeah, the
Mhm.
flowers. Yeah.
Do they interact with other living things?
I mean, birds make nests in them. Different animals can make different like habitats and stuff with them. So yeah.
Do they move?
In the wind? Yes.
So this one is a very challenging one when you're thinking about
Yeah.
plants. Who can think of ways, okay, that plants
Oh,
move? They
well,
move in the
sunflowers
wind.
move. Sunflowers move to see for the light.
Mhm.
So in that sense, I mean, the trees would move in the wind, but it doesn't really move just in general for the sunlight and stuff.
That's the wind moving the tree, but but plants can move. They can grow towards light. They can
Yes.
turn. They can shift their direction.
And can't their roots maybe move to get nutrients or water or whatever they're looking for?
Yeah.
Can anybody think of another way that plants move? Not an individual plant necessarily.
Oh, with
Seed dispersal.
Yeah, the seeds that get dropped down and then the birds take them different other places.
Yeah. So what about, okay, so that these criteria, our tree is yes for all of these criteria.
Yeah.
Let's consider a car. Do cars grow?
No.
Do they reproduce?
No.
Do they use energy?
Technically, yes. But
Yeah.
gas.
Do they die? Yes, when you don't want them to, right?
Yes.
They change with the seasons.
I mean, if you have a convertible, you can open up it in the sun, but I mean, technically not.
But they might rust in the winter.
Oh yes, rust in the snow.
A directional life cycle.
No.
Do they interact with other living things?
Yes, humans drive them.
And do they move?
On their own.
On their own, no.
Well, but they do move. They move.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah, they move.
So doing this kind of comparison between living and non-living, you really start to think about what criteria do we really need to understand what it means to be a living thing.
Oh no, sorry, I lost my list. Ah.
Oh dear.
Oh well.
Okay, well, we are running out of time, so I want to.
That was a good exercise. That was great.
I think you can hit redo, Eric, or undo, redo. There's
thank
those
you.
buttons at the top too.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah. So I think, can anybody come up with a takeaway message from what we just did?
Life is very complex.
Very true.
I think it'd be fun to have the kids really think, what is a good definition for something that's living or not?
I was mentioning to Betsy when I was at Chabot, we did an activity similar to this, but it was to tee the students up to think about extraterrestrial life we might find on another planet. How would we know whether it was alive or not? And so what we did was we used a lot of weird things on Earth that, just as you're describing, and finding things you don't really know. It's like, well, I think it came from something alive, or it looks like it had been alive. So it was a really nice way to get students thinking about just that profound question, what is life and can life exist somewhere else? And if it could, how would we discover it? What kinds of things, what kind of questions, as you generated here, would we ask to actually figure out whether something was living or not? So nice job.
So another takeaway here is that there may not just be one thing that defines a living thing. It may be a combination of features. And we've made a really nice list. And but I really like what you said about trying to come up with a definition and thinking about those contexts of why do we care. I'm going to introduce one more context where this can become relevant, but I want to show you the next slide.
Sorry, I was trying to capture our little, we'll get there. All right, let me just move us on. Mouse, okay. Oh.
Yeah, so scientists basically, we consider that it's a suite of characteristics, all of which are required to show that something is alive. It can't just be one thing, because there are many things that have that are not living that have that feature, right? So it's not just one feature. You really need a number of things. And these are the basic things. They have needs for air, water, food, and to eliminate waste from their bodies. They respond to the environment, they grow, they reproduce, and they adapt. And another thing is that they have DNA, and that is really part of reproducing. So those are all features that as scientists, that's kind of what we consider characteristics of all organisms. But I don't think it's good to go straight for this answer, because I think the value of this is to really think about what it means to be a living or a non-living thing. Next slide. So an organism is a word that I'm never sure whether I should use it with students or not, because I don't really know how they understand it. But an organism is any living thing. It can be any plant, any animal, any fungus, any bacteria. So there are many different forms of living things. It's not just animals. Next slide.
Just maybe a quick note on that too. Then there's some weird things, like is a virus actually alive? Because a virus depends on cells, living other beings or other entity cells to replicate. So you've got these quasi interesting sort of things too, on top of the ones that you've already shared in terms of, was it living, was it not?
So when we talk about living and non-living things, in the context of an ecosystem, that's important, because an ecosystem is all the living and non-living parts of an environment, and they all support each other in different ways. And in an ecosystem, we talk about biotic and abiotic factors. So biotic factors are the living parts of an ecosystem, and that includes things that are alive and were once alive, but may no longer be alive. So like dead wood, dead leaves are biotic factors in an ecosystem. And then there's the abiotic, or the non-living parts of an ecosystem. Can anybody give me some ideas of what abiotic aspects of, or parts, components of an ecosystem might be? Important ones.
Like fungus.
Fungus is a living organism.
Minerals.
Minerals,
Water, soil,
water,
sun.
Soil's living.
sun. Soil can be living. That there are components of soil, like if there's sand in the soil or minerals in the soil, that's a non-living component, but really soil kind of is a living thing, because it's got many living organisms and dead matter in it. Yeah, air, weather. Students often think that wind is a living thing. That's something that I've come across a bunch, but wind and weather are also abiotic parts of the ecosystem, and they all have a very big influence on how that ecosystem functions and what can live in a place. So it's really nice to be able to go into an environment and think about what are the abiotic and the biotic factors in an ecosystem. Next slide. So we won't do this today because we don't have time, but if we did, we could go back to our window and take a new page in our notebook and draw some ecosystem connections for our plant. We could go and we find 2 biotic connections and 2 abiotic connections, draw an arrow, draw them and draw arrows from them to the plant, and then write on that arrow, what is that interaction? How does this How do they influence each other? How do they interact with each other? Why are they important to each other? And so now you're starting to get a feel for all the interconnectedness of the elements of an ecosystem. And you can think about them as living elements and non-living elements. And so just leave it at that. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So next time, we're going to talk more about ecosystem connections and sort of build on this. And meanwhile, if we had done this exercise, I was going to have you think about what would happen if one of those abiotic or biotic things disappeared. And there's lots of examples where that happened. You know, the dinosaurs, they lost, there was a lot of abiotic changes that caused their extinction. So there's a lot of places, in a lot of places where there's environmental deterioration and degradation, or you build a shopping mall in a field where there used to be a lot of mice. And now there's no mice living there anymore because there's no habitat for them. So thinking about those connections, you can go a lot of different directions with that. So there's some resource links for activities around living and non-living. You can look out your window and explore your environment to say what's living and what's non-living. So that we've got it all around us, but there's also some slide decks that have images. There's a couple of lesson plans. So these are all resources that we will provide to you, links, so you can, and they're on the CRS website as well. And there's also a little note about doing science outdoors, because when you take your kids outdoors, there's some strategies that you might want to engage to make it safer and more productive. So there's some resources there for you. Eric, did you want to do the mystery science connections?
Yeah, just we're aware that your district is actively using mystery science. So we wanted to make some connections specifically to some of the things we talked about and did today. So just, I won't go into them for sake of time, but again, these will all be part of what we share with you. The bottom one is very much about what Betsy's talking about, the interconnections within an ecosystem, or like the web of life idea. So these are just a few that we pulled out that we thought were particularly relevant and connected to some of the concepts that we covered today. But mystery science, as you know, there's quite a bit there. And then these are just some resource links overall to support you in your work as distance learning educators. So we've got a link on CR's website for that. I mentioned the climate literacy series that we're working on again this spring. We'll have 10+ workshops being delivered both by myself and Betsy and CRS team, and by partners. Other organizations, stopwaste.org is going to be involved, the Chabot Space and Science Center, numerous other organizations will be helping us out. And then there's also a partner resource guide. So if you're interested in learning more about partners that we work with and some of the things that they do, and how we support each other, there's information and a resource guide there. So I think that wraps us up. We have just a little quick form or survey we'd love to have you fill out. I'm going to copy this, or Betsy, are you able to capture that and copy that in the chat?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. I know, John, if you're there, you'd wanted to mention the idea of the supply distribution and just checking in on attendance today.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I want to thank CRS. Thank you, Eric and Betsy, for being with us. Always love being with you and the great stuff you're providing. And teachers, thank you so much for being here and really for trying to make an effort to bring science with all the things that you guys are doing and everything. Really appreciate you bringing hands-on science to the kids. We have materials packets for you. They're coming. They're coming to my house, and I'm making kits for you. So we'll either get those to your sites, or we'll provide an opportunity for pickup. So you'll have those two options. We'll work it out. That should be coming. Information will be coming in the next few days, specifically. And then remember, you don't need to fill out a time card. This time we're taking attendance just by the Zoom reports, and it's a 2-pack. So we want to see you at the next one as well. So thanks very much. And I'm going to run over to the other session, and Eric and Betsy, you guys can wrap up. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks so much, John. And thank you teachers for taking the time out of your busy lives in the afternoon on a Wednesday to join us. Betsy's dropped the short survey form. If you could go ahead and fill that out and give us a little bit of feedback. And any last questions, thoughts for the group before we let you go set yourselves up for dinner?
Oh, I was gonna say I really appreciated the one we did in the fall with the Rube Goldberg machines. It was a big hit. Not everybody did it, which is how distance learning works, but a lot of them did it. We did flip good videos where they could make a flip good video showing their machine. There were a lot of very, very cool ones, and it was very fun. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that you mentioning that, and we're that's really great to hear, because we're running a similar lesson based on what we learned with you with the Annie Yates School in Emeryville. So they'll be engaging in a similar activity, and what we learned during that session with you all, we're going to carry forward. So thank you for that feedback.
So like last time, what we're hoping is that you'll spend some time with some of the things that we showed you today with your students over the next couple of weeks. And when we come back, we can talk about how those things worked and have some time to share out about that. And also, some of the materials you're going to get include seeds. And we didn't really talk about how to use them, but the whole idea of drawing a plant changing over time out your window, you can obviously do the same thing with a plant that you're germinating. And you can obviously think about the biotic and abiotic factors that influence that plant. So there's a lot of concepts that you could bring into germinating seeds in that way.
And just at the tail end of the slideshow, here's to Betsy's point, here's some information about seed sprouting in plastic bags. It's an activity that I think the K2 group is actually engaging in, or will be invited to engage in, but it's also pretty dynamic. And I agree that for the 3rd through 5th graders, it's a great opportunity to watch something change and grow.
I have to tell you that I work with a lot of 7th graders, and a lot of them do experiments on seeds, germinating seeds, like putting different kinds of liquids on them, using different amounts of water, adding salt water, testing salt water versus fresh water, different kinds of light environments, given more or less light, and just to see what happens to the seeds. So they're really easy to experiment on, and it never gets old. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, and again, keep your own learner hats on too. You've identified that plant out in your backyard or out your window, out your door. Please observe that over the next 3 weeks, and we'll try and loop back to some of the things you observe about that, and then engage in that activity with your students if you can in the next 3 weeks. And we'll be looking a little bit more next time at ecosystems, some of those abiotic connections that we were just brainstorming around at the end of our workshop today. So yeah, we'll see you for round 2 in 3 weeks. And thanks again.
Yeah.
Have a great night.
Did you take some tenders too, Evan, or not?
Thank you all for being here and doing what you do. It's really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually,
Yeah.
Could you just show that page that had the mystery signs? There were a couple other things I want to look at. Could you just show that for 1 sec? I was just taking a picture.
I can put the links in the chat if you want.
Was it?
I think they had other things other than mystery signs on it. That's why. Yeah. If you could just leave that up for. Let me just take a quick picture.
Sure.
Yeah, those are all mystery science
Oh, they are okay. Yeah.
links. Yeah, they are.
I was
all,
typing something else when you guys were talking about that.
yeah, but if you want me to, I can give you those links directly. They'll probably be in the materials that we share with you. You'll get an email with all of this.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for your help.
Yep. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your comments. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's exactly 5 o'clock.
We did it. Yeah.
Yeah, I left out that last little bit, and
I think that was fine though. I think it flowed
Yeah,
really
I think
nicely.
it was okay.
Yeah. I
Oh,
turned
did you
recording-
stop recording?
Stop recording. I did.
Oh, good, because I always forget that.
Oh yeah, John, did you stop too?